On June 27, 2004, the world of drag racing lost one of its brightest young talents. Darrell Russell, a 35-year-old from Hockley, Texas, was competing in the second round of the Sears Craftsman Nationals at Gateway International Raceway near Madison, Illinois. He was the fastest qualifier. He was dominating the competition. He was on the verge of winning another trophy to add to his collection. And then, in a horrifying instant, his dragster disintegrated at over 300 miles per hour. A rear tire exploded, sending shrapnel into his cockpit. Flying debris struck him with fatal force. Within hours, Russell died at St. Louis University Medical Center from massive head trauma. This wasn't a wall hit. This wasn't a mechanical explosion. This was a tire failure, the kind that drag racing insiders knew was possible, the kind that crew chiefs whispered about in the pits, the kind that everyone hoped would never happen. It did, and it changed everything about how the NHRA approached driver safety forever. Darrell James Russell was born on September 20, 1968. He grew up dreaming of racing, but when he finally got his chance to compete in Top Fuel, the fastest, most powerful drag racing category, almost nobody believed he would succeed. Russell had never sat in a Top Fuel dragster until shortly before the 2001 NHRA AutoZone Winter Nationals in Pomona, California. He was coming up from the top alcohol dragster ranks. He was up against seasoned professionals who had logged thousands of passes down the quarter-mile strip. And yet, when that first race came around, Russell did something that only two other drivers in NHRA history had ever accomplished. He won his professional debut. Not only did he win, he obliterated the field. His final time was 4.665 seconds at 309.77 miles per hour. His opponent, Mike Dunn, lost traction and coasted to a losing 5.560 at 231.44. Russell's dominance that day wasn't luck. It wasn't a fluke. It was the mark of someone who had been born for this sport. That 2001 Winter Nationals victory came courtesy of Joe Amato, a five-time NHRA Top Fuel champion who had retired from driving at the end of 2000 after an incredible career. Amato had won 52 Top Fuel national events and was the winningest driver in NHRA Top Fuel history at that point. When he decided to step out from behind the wheel due to a detached retina that threatened his vision, he needed someone to take over his legendary dragster, someone with the talent, the hunger, and the mental toughness to carry on the legacy. Gary Scelzi, who would go on to become a three-time Top Fuel champion, personally recommended Russell to Amato. Scelzi had raced against Russell in the lower alcohol categories and knew he had something special. That recommendation proved to be one of the most prescient in drag racing history. Amato took a chance on this driver from the alcohol ranks, and Russell repaid him with immediate success. In his rookie season, Russell won twice and reached the final round 7 times. The NHRA awarded him the 2001 Rookie of the Year trophy. Russell's debut was remarkable. He joined Casey Spurlock, who won his funny car debut in 1990, and Gary Scelzi, who won his Top Fuel debut in 1997, as the only drivers in NHRA history to win in their first professional start. Scelzi had gone on to win 5 races in his 1997 debut year and captured the championship, becoming the first rookie to do so. For Russell, 2001 was pure magic. He proved beyond any shadow of a doubt that he belonged in the professional ranks. The next 3 seasons saw Russell continue to build on his success. By early 2004, he had accumulated 6 career national event wins and had established himself as one of the most respected drivers in the Top Fuel division. His crew chief was Wayne Dupuis, and together they had become one of the best driver-crew chief tandems in the sport. They were clicking, they were fast, they were winning. As summer approached, Russell and his wife Julie attended the Sears Craftsman Nationals at Gateway International Raceway with confidence soaring. He had just recorded his 6th career win 2 weeks earlier at the Pontiac Excitement Nationals in Columbus, Ohio, ending a 2-year winless drought. The team was on an upswing. Nothing suggested that this race would be different from any other event on the tour. Gateway International Raceway sits just outside St. Louis, across the river from the city. On a hot summer afternoon, drag racing fans packed the grandstands to witness the fastest quarter-mile racing on Earth. The Sears Craftsman Nationals is a major event on the NHRA calendar, one of the crown jewels of professional drag racing. Qualifying had taken place on Friday and Saturday. Russell had been absolutely dominant. He posted the fastest qualifying time of the weekend with an elapsed time of 4.511 seconds. No one else came close. He had the number 1 position on the ladder, which meant he would race the weakest opponent based on qualifying position. By Sunday's second round, Russell seemed unstoppable. He had easily dispatched TJ Zizzo in the first round. Now, in his second matchup, he faced Scott Kalitta, a 2-time Top Fuel champion and 17-time Top Fuel winner. Kalitta was no pushover, but Russell had the better car, the better qualifying time, and the better track position. Both drivers strapped into their dragsters, vehicles powered by supercharged Hemi engines that produced approximately 8,000 horsepower each. The pairing was set. Russell in the left lane, Kalitta in the right lane. The starting lights flashed green. Russell launched, his dragster accelerating at tremendous G-forces from rest. The rear Goodyear slicks grabbed the track with ferocity. The front wheels lifted slightly as the thousands of horses pushed the machine forward at an incomprehensible rate. Within 1/8 of a mile, Russell was pushing 200 miles per hour. By the 3/8 mark, he was approaching 300. The noise was deafening. The power was overwhelming. A Top Fuel dragster is the most powerful vehicle per unit weight on the planet. Only jet fighters and space shuttles accelerate faster. Russell's car was a blur of speed and raw American power. As he crossed the finish line, Russell's dragster was running 4.611 seconds at 322.73 miles per hour in the final 66 feet. Kalitta ran 4.594 at 328.94 miles per hour, just slightly quicker. Russell had lost by a hair. It was heartbreaking, but not catastrophic. He had still made a solid run. A loss to Kalitta was no shame. Now came the moment that every Top Fuel driver performs multiple times per season, slowing down from over 320 miles per hour to a safe stop. Russell reached down and pulled the parachute deployment handle. 2 parachutes, configured in a tandem system, inflate behind the dragster to create aerodynamic drag that slows the vehicle. The parachutes deployed. The rear wing provided downforce. The dragster began to decelerate. And then, in a fraction of a second that would last forever in the memories of everyone who witnessed it, the left rear tire exploded. Not a slow leak, not a gradual deflation. A violent, catastrophic explosion. The tire, manufactured by Goodyear specifically for Top Fuel racing, simply came apart. Goodyear was the exclusive tire supplier for NHRA drag racing, and they had developed a specific product line for the extreme demands of Top Fuel. This tire had to withstand the crushing weight of a dragster under full acceleration, the lateral forces of a slightly unbalanced platform, the extreme heat generated by friction with the track surface, and the opposite forces created by parachute deployment. In this case, as Russell pulled the parachutes at over 320 miles per hour, the tire failed catastrophically. The explosion was violent. Shrapnel, chunks of rubber and tire carcass, flew upward and backward toward the cockpit. Russell's rear wing, which was mounted on struts that extended upward and backward from the chassis, suddenly had no downforce support from the failed rear tire. The aerodynamics of the dragster became unstable. The rear end swung to the left as the dragster crossed the center line. Russell's car was now sideways to the track. Kalitta's dragster, still traveling at high speed, collided with Russell's rear quarter panel, tearing away Russell's parachutes and further destabilizing the vehicle. Russell's dragster spun and twisted, moving backward at an angle toward the left wall. The concrete barrier loomed. At tremendous speed, Russell's dragster hit the left retaining wall rear first. The impact was tremendous. Flying debris from the tire explosion, pieces of rubber, tire cord, and other material, had penetrated the cockpit area. One piece, or possibly several pieces acting in concert, struck Russell's head with devastating force. Paint samples matching the Goodyear tire were later discovered embedded in the fragments of his shattered helmet. The head injuries were incompatible with life. Emergency crews were on scene within seconds, their lights flashing, their radios crackling. The NHRA safety team activated their response protocols. Fire extinguishers were deployed. Russell, despite wearing an approved racing helmet and all mandatory safety equipment, was unconscious. The NHRA's emergency response team, directed by Dan Brickey, rapidly assessed the situation. Medical personnel carefully immobilized his spine, removed his helmet, and prepared him for transport. A helicopter was standing by inside the adjacent OVERTK facility at Gateway. Within minutes, Russell was lifted onto a stretcher and rushed to the waiting aircraft. The helicopter took flight toward St. Louis University Medical Center, approximately 10 miles away. Russell remained unconscious during the flight and throughout his initial hospitalization. Doctors worked frantically to save his life, but his injuries were simply too severe. He had suffered massive trauma to the back left side of his head, likely from flying debris, possibly a section of tire, possibly a wing strut, possibly some combination of all three. Less than 2 hours after the incident, Russell was pronounced dead. Darrell Russell, 35 years old, the 2001 NHRA Rookie of the Year, a skilled driver with a bright future, was gone. The mood at Gateway International Raceway shifted from excitement to devastation. The racing community had experienced individual tragedies before, but this was different. Russell wasn't a dinosaur from drag racing's early days. He wasn't someone who had been pushing the sport's boundaries recklessly. He was a young professional, doing his job, racing hard but safely, and he had been killed by a mechanical failure that the entire industry knew could happen, but hadn't addressed adequately. Fellow Top Fuel driver Gary Scelzi, who had recommended Russell to Joe Amato and had watched Russell's career blossom, accepted his funny car victory trophy with tears in his eyes. "Daryl was a good friend," Scelzi said. "We raced together in the alcohol classes, and we raced each other in Top Fuel. He was someone who never said anything negative about anyone or anything. He was just like me in that he loved racing out here, and he was loved by everyone. He's going to be missed for a very long time. My heart goes out to his wife, Julie, and the entire Russell family down in Texas." John Force, a 12-time NHRA funny car champion at the time and one of the sport's most respected voices, offered his perspective on what had occurred. Force noted that many people don't understand just how dangerous Top Fuel racing truly is. "Some people say that drag racing isn't very dangerous because we don't go around corners like they do in NASCAR," Force said. "These cars out here are making 10 times the horsepower of those NASCAR machines. When you're traveling that fast and something goes wrong, you don't need a corner to get into serious trouble. We loved Daryl, and we love his family, and he's loved where he is right now." The racing community was stunned. Russell's wife, Julie, was devastated. Funeral arrangements were made for the following week. Over 2,000 people attended Russell's funeral in Texas, testament to the impact he had made on everyone who knew him. Members of the NHRA community and fellow drivers made the journey to pay their respects. Russell's sudden death was the first fatality at an NHRA national event since Blaine Johnson had been killed during qualifying at the U.S. Nationals in Indianapolis on August 31, 1996. That 8-year gap had bred a sense of complacency in some corners of the racing world, a belief that safety protocols had become sufficient, that the danger had been adequately mitigated. Russell's death shattered that illusion. The NHRA had a crisis on its hands. Top Fuel drivers were some of the most skilled and fearless racers in the world, but even their skill and bravery could not overcome a fundamental mechanical failure. The Goodyear tire had been the subject of whispered concerns in the pits for months. Crew chiefs and team owners knew there had been issues. Wayne Dupuis, Russell's crew chief, would later reveal that the entire drag racing community understood the tire was problematic. "All the crew chiefs knew that we were having problems with that tire," Dupuis said. "I know no one wanted to listen to a crew chief like me about the tire, and I'm just really sorry that it had to take someone's life before things were changed." Immediately after Russell's death, Goodyear launched an investigation into the tire. They quickly discovered that the tire had been prone to failures under the extreme conditions of Top Fuel racing. Within days of Russell's fatal crash, Goodyear worked with the NHRA to develop an improved version of the tire. The new design featured a harder rubber compound intended to prevent the type of failures that had plagued the previous tire. The updated tire was also designed to expand less under the extreme heat and pressure of Top Fuel racing. The NHRA didn't stop with the tire redesign. Immediately, the sanctioning body mandated cockpit shielding, a 2 mm thick, 0.090-inch titanium barrier to be installed behind the driver's head inside the roll cage. This shielding was designed to block internal debris and shrapnel from penetrating the driver compartment in the event of failures like the one that had killed Russell. The titanium was strong enough to resist impact from the kinds of flying debris that had proven fatal, yet it added minimal weight to the dragster. Next came changes to the fuel mixture. The NHRA had previously established a 90% maximum nitromethane content in top fuel. In the aftermath of Russell's death, the NHRA reduced the maximum nitromethane content to 85%, effective for the remainder of the 2004 season and beyond. The idea was that less nitro would produce less power and lower speeds, theoretically making the cars more controllable and reducing the aerodynamic forces at play. Finally, the NHRA implemented changes to rear wing angle specifications. The rear wing on a top fuel dragster is one of the most critical aerodynamic components. At high speed, the wing produces thousands of pounds of downforce, which helps keep the rear tires planted on the track and allows the driver to make harder accelerations. But if the wing's angle of attack is too aggressive, it creates excessive drag and can destabilize the vehicle, especially if one rear tire loses traction or fails. The NHRA changed the maximum primary rear wing element angle to 2 degrees positive, measured when the dragster is at rest, which would decrease the amount of downforce the wing could produce. This would make the cars slightly slower, but potentially more stable if a tire failure occurred. All of these changes happened rapidly, within days or weeks of Russell's death. But the racing community was divided on whether these changes were the right solution. Some argued that making the cars slower was not the answer, that increased safety measures were needed instead. Teams immediately struggled with the rule changes. Crew chiefs who had spent years perfecting their tuning combinations for 90% nitro fuel suddenly had to start from scratch with 85% nitro fuel. The engines behaved differently. Power delivery changed. Driveline components that had worked fine with the old fuel ratio now had to be recalibrated. Some teams made the adjustment quickly. Others, including some of the championship favorites, found themselves struggling for the rest of the season. The 85% nitro rule, however, was controversial. By 2008, team owners and crew chiefs had lobbied the NHRA extensively, arguing that the reduced nitro was causing mechanical failures and that the rule change had not actually improved safety in the way it was intended. The NHRA, facing pressure from the sport's biggest teams and most influential voices, rescinded the 85% rule and returned to the 90% maximum in 2008. The titanium cockpit shielding remained, however, and became a permanent safety feature that is in all top fuel dragsters to this day. The tire redesign also remained, and Goodyear continued to evolve their top fuel tire compounds and construction methods to improve reliability and reduce failure rates. Russell's death occurred 8 years after Blaine Johnson's fatal crash at the 1996 U.S. Nationals. Johnson had been a 4-time top alcohol dragster champion and the points leader in top fuel when his engine let go during a qualifying pass. The engine failure damaged his rear tire, which failed and sent his dragster careening toward the guardrail. Johnson crashed at approximately 300 miles per hour and was airlifted to Methodist Hospital in Indianapolis, where he died from his injuries. Johnson's death had been the first top fuel fatality at an NHRA national event since Pete Robinson's death during the 1971 Winter Nationals at Pomona. The gap between Johnson's death in 1996 and Russell's death in 2004 had created a false sense of security in the sport. 8 years without a fatality at a national event was a genuine achievement for NHRA safety. But it had also bred complacency. The assumption had become that modern safety equipment, helmets, fire suits, roll cages, head and neck restraints, and parachutes, had rendered the sport safe enough. Russell's death proved that assumption wrong. He had been wearing all the required safety equipment. His car had been properly constructed and inspected. His crew chief had been experienced and careful. And yet, a single tire failure had killed him. The NHRA was forced to confront the reality that as long as top-fuel dragsters were accelerating at tremendous G-forces from a standing start and traveling at over 300 miles per hour in a quarter mile, there would always be an element of danger that no amount of safety equipment could completely eliminate. The goal had to be continuous improvement, constant vigilance, and a willingness to implement new safety measures whenever evidence suggested they could save lives. Gateway International Raceway honored Russell's memory by naming one of its grandstands the Darrell Russell Stand. Every time the NHRA comes to Gateway for a national event, racing fans sitting in that grandstand are reminded of the driver who gave his life in pursuit of speed and glory. Russell's legacy in the sport is secured through multiple channels. He remains one of only 3 drivers in NHRA history to win his professional debut. His 2001 Rookie of the Year trophy stands as a testament to his immediate impact on professional drag racing. His 6 national event wins, though modest in number compared to drivers with longer careers, represent a win rate and consistency that placed him among the elite of his era. But perhaps his most important legacy is the safety changes his death prompted. The titanium cockpit shielding that is now mandatory in all top-fuel dragsters exists because Darrell Russell died. The tire redesigns and improved quality control measures at Goodyear exist because of his fatal crash. The conversations about fuel mixtures, aerodynamics, and the eternal balance between speed and safety in drag racing are ongoing, in part because Russell's death forced the NHRA and the entire industry to confront hard questions about what safety really means in a sport that pushes the absolute limits of physics and human courage. Darrell Russell was 35 years old when he died. He left behind his wife, Julie, and a family that loved him. He left behind a sport that he had helped push forward through his skill, his enthusiasm, and his genuine kindness to everyone around him. Gary Skelzy's words at the 2004 Sears Craftsman Nationals, spoken through tears while accepting his own trophy, remain the most fitting tribute. He was someone who never said anything negative about anyone or anything. He was just like me in that he loved racing out here, and he was loved by everyone. He's going to be missed for a very long time. The gates of Gateway International Raceway remain open every summer for new races, new drivers, and new moments of glory. But the Darrell Russell Stand stands as a permanent reminder that in the pursuit of speed, there is always a price. Russell paid the ultimate price, and through his sacrifice, the sport he loved became safer for everyone who came after him.